Good evening. Good evening. Good to see you all. Happy New Year. It's our first meeting in the new year. So many other things already happened that it's difficult to believe. We'll be starting at 7, as always, UK time. And while we are waiting, you can write in the chat box where you are in the world, who you are. Is it your first time? Have you been with us before? I always assume that everybody here is a regular participant. And when we did the polls a couple of times, about 50% of people are new and first time with us, so welcome. Please do let us know, and maybe let us know how did you find out, how did you hear about us? Because we do mention it in several ways, in Facebook group, in the Therapy Today, in the Psychologist. So it's just good to know how did you hear about these events. And if you've been here before, welcome back. And I hope you'll enjoy it. Hello from Hove, not far from here at all. Scotland, that's a bit farther. Winchester, first time, welcome. Bath, gosh, all my Jane Austen places. I love Jane Austen. So Winchester and Bath, they both go under that. Maybe that's why, maybe it's selective attention and I'm just noticing those places when I'm reading here. London, Glasgow, Kent. Lovely, lovely to see you all, and it's 7 o'clock. Welcome. My name is Dr. Julia Budnik, and I'm one of the directors of SDS seminars. And the other director is Paul Grantham, who will be leading today's event with you. And we are very happy to see you here. Yes, actually, just crossed my mind. Please, can I ask you to mute your microphones? And I will do it for the top 3 people, simply because there will be interruptions. You know, we are all at home, it's evening, people will be shouting out to us, the phones will be going off. So it's much better if we keep our microphones off until we want to speak, and then we might put them on. Because these are big events and lots of people are attending, speaking might be problematic. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. I am trying, while Paul is speaking, I'm trying to cut and paste and save the questions which I want to ask at the end. Because obviously you know that in the chat box they very quickly disappear if lots of people are typing, but I try to keep an eye on them, and that's probably the safest way in terms of asking questions. Alternatively, you can use your blue electronic hand, which is under the list of participants on the right hand side of the screen. You can put that up and you'll be immediately pushed to the top of the screen, to the top of the queue. Waving at the screen with questions will produce no result, and it's absolutely nothing personal, but because we've got over 255 participants, you obviously will end up on the screens which we can't see necessarily. So electronic hand or chat box is the best option. So our SDS Free Thursdays started in March last year, practically in the first week of the lockdown, of our first lockdown. Now we count lockdowns as well, the first, the second. So now we are in the beginning of the second lockdown, and we're still here. And unfortunately, my prediction, we will be continuing with training via distance training for quite a while, I think. it's one of these areas which actually adapted pretty quickly to the situation and probably will stay like this for quite a while. So we are all experts now in this online training, and that's good. I think it's a good thing, because actually we can access much more and we can invite new trainers. And these are a couple of things which I want to mention to you before I pass the microphone to Paul, and it will enable some latecomers to join us. We have quite a lot of new events planned for 2021. And I've just updated today, let me share the screen with you. I've just updated today our website and added a brand new event which will be happening in March. And that is a masterclass with Professor Ray Di Giuseppe. I can't write, that's the way to find it. So masterclasses, and right at the top, the assessment, diagnosis and treatment of anger with Professor Ray Di Giuseppe. He is one of the, if not the leading specialist in the field of anger. And we've decided to invite him after a couple of Thursdays like this, which Paul was running on anger. And we had so many questions and so many various underlying issues and things which relate to anger and different types of anger. So we felt that actually it would be lovely to invite a world-class expert to talk to us on anger. Again, I just ask people, please mute your microphones, I can hear you. And so Ray agreed to come and do a masterclass for us. And at this particular moment in time, this masterclass is available to you with a super early bird discount. Which is a £60 discount. So if you go on our website, click on masterclasses or click on special offers, you will be able to book this event on Zoom, 1 day, full day event at a very good price. And also Ray Di Giuseppe will join us for this free Thursday in 2 weeks' time on the 28th of January. So if you want to be careful and cautious and want to hear him first and listen to him first and then book, you can do that, because I've decided to extend this discount until the 31st of January. But super early bird price is a very good price for that particular event. And another event I wanted to draw your attention to is event which Paul will be offering, and it will be also in March. And again, we are answering your calls, because this topic has been sort of flagged up more and more with us, that we need to offer something on this topic, and it's how to work with personality disorders. So 2 day, full day on Zoom seminar on personality disorders with Paul Grantham. And again, it's currently on super early bird discount until 31st of January. And the event will be on the 18th and 19th of March. So these two things I just wanted to flag up for you before we move on with today's topic. Today, we are continuing our discussion on Socratic questioning. There were lots and lots of questions last time when Paul did this event on Socratic questioning. So he is more or less continuing from where he left last time. What I'll do now, Paul, just one moment. I will mute everybody so we don't get all these noises. And then I will unmute just you, Paul, okay? So let's do that. And now I'll find you, Paul, and I will unmute you. Okay, did it work? Yes.
Hi. Yeah, I think it's worked. That's great. Welcome, folks. Can I just add something to what Julia's just said about Ray? A couple of things really, which I think are important to bear in mind. I've been trying to get hold of this guy to do some training with us now for probably something towards 4 years. And every time we've tried to link in with when he's coming over to Europe, it's been a bad time for us. We've got something else booked or whatever, and and to be honest with you, it's one of the rare advantages that has come from the pandemic, is of course the whole creation of distance training. So Ray, by the way, will actually be delivering this training for us from New York State. Unlike some of our American presenters who have had to get up at crazy times, like 2 in the morning to do this last year, at least he'll only have to be starting, I think I'm right in thinking, at something like 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning. But it's a rare occasion. I can't recommend him enough. I've known him for a number of years. I've trained with him. He was one of the big influences, certainly on my early thinking of regarding anger problems. So yeah, do sign up. He's worth listening to. Right, so today what have we got? We have got Socratic questioning part 2, which is really a follow-on from the last one that we actually did. And as Julia mentioned, we decided to do this simply because the interest was so great. The number of questions were so great in connection with this that I basically put together a follow-on from this. Can I again remind you, of course, and I'm sure that Julia will pop things into the chat box anyway, but there is a whole 2 days training on this that is coming up relatively soon. I think I'm right in thinking, but Julia will put the details in for you. So really what I wanted to sort of pick up on today were some of the, rather than the background on it, some of the practical mechanics of how you actually conduct a Socratic inquiry or use Socratic questioning in your therapy work, really. So I'll just share my screen. So hopefully you've got that there for you. Yeah, this is, as I say, a part 2. So I'm not going to go over obviously the basics that I covered in part 1 last time. I'm equally, by definition, not going to be able to go into the degree of detail that we actually have on the 2-day training course, which incidentally lays a great deal of emphasis on practice and feedback. I just really wanted to take you through some of the mechanics of actually doing this. Having said that, I did think it would actually be useful to at least start really by reminding you really what the actual purpose of this actually is. So some basic things I have mentioned the last time, but I mentioned them again. Top of the list is understanding the client's experience and particularly their beliefs and thoughts in connection with the particular problem that they actually have. As I've mentioned to you before, Socratic questioning predates CBT, but this is the context in which we're primarily going to be looking at it. It's secondly to help the client examine those beliefs in detail to determine their validity. So it's a collaborative exercise which is designed to encourage, almost I think in many ways, the client to stand outside of themselves and to actually have a look at the things that they believe and to examine it in more detail. And I think the net result of this is to support the client in questioning those unhelpful beliefs and, if it's appropriate, to modify them. Now, obviously, there is the possibility here, which I guess inevitably crosses people's minds, that maybe someone's beliefs are actually quite valid. We do get into that particular issue on the 2-day course, but I'm going to obviously have to leave it to one side at the moment. But there is the assumption here that if we're going to focus on a particular belief that's connected with the problem, that the client actually has. The assumption is that basically that belief is not helpful for the client. It's not enabling the client to function as they might hope to. And as a result of this, to help the client to begin to modify these and to support the client, and I think this is an important part, to support the client in exploring the difference such changes would make regarding their other thoughts, but probably most significantly in connection with how they feel and what they do. So it's helping the client to see that basically cognitive modifications or changes produce a change in emotional state and also behavior. So that's the sort of basic way in which it tends to be approached and what its aims actually are. So the next question, I guess, almost inevitably is how do you actually do this? And there's a number, I'm not going to get into the issue of attitudes, which I know that I covered last time, but I did want to briefly mention something which is quite a guiding principle, both within the training day, and I think as well for folks who are using Socratic questioning for the first time, that I think very often people say, well, I can understand the logic behind this, why it would be useful to approach things with my clients in this particular way, but to be blunt with you, what is it that I actually say? How do I actually do this? And again, for reasons that we'll pick up on the 2 days, there is very, very little that is actually written in the therapy field regarding this. Interestingly enough, there's a lot more written outside of the therapy field on it. But one of the things that I found particularly useful, both for myself and for supervisees and for people that I actually train, is to provide a very sort of brief outline of the types of question that you could ask as part of your Socratic questioning, which is termed the Carpus questions. This is actually adapted, would you believe, from an engineer called Paul, who has written extensively on it in connection with problem solving and engineering. I know you never thought that you would hear of something that would be useful for therapy from an engineering background, but I genuinely think from a practical perspective, this is probably one of the best things I've actually seen written. So Carpus stands, it's an acronym, and it stands for, as you can see, clarifying, assumption, reason, perspective, evidence, implication, and sources questions. Now, what I do want to emphasize with this is that this should be treated as a menu. In other words, these are types of question that you can potentially dip into in terms of the conversation that you're actually having with your client. It would be inappropriate, can I say, to be using all of these in any one conversation that you have with your client. It's there to dip into as you need them, really. A couple of points I would make about these. First of all, I think what's broadly important to recognize is that although you wouldn't use all of these, just in exactly the same way that you wouldn't have dessert before your starter, in exactly the same way you wouldn't be asking source questions before you ask clarifying questions. So there is a broad order to these in terms of the way in which you might work through them with a client. And there are some of these types of questions, incidentally, which, for want of a better term, will give you a bigger bang for your buck than others. This is a purely personal view, but generally speaking, I tended to find that you probably will get bigger shifts and also, I think, engage your client much more successfully, particularly through the use of clarifying, reason and perspective questions. I don't want to say don't use the others. All I'm simply saying is that when you try these out, which obviously I hope you do, you may well find that you're getting a better response to some of these types of questions than others, really. So what I thought I would do would be to basically take a case that I worked with last year and to not go into the whole question of how the case was addressed or the formulation or the treatment program. or even the outcome, to be honest with you. I just really wanted to take this as an illustration of how Socratic questioning can be used in a particular context. So this related to Jerry, a 17-year-old who was referred, where the presenting problem was exam anxiety. As is the case generally with certainly initial work within CBT, I think when I say initial work, I mean initial session or sessions, the focus is typically on trying to identify recent manifestations of the problem, how the problem has presented itself fairly recently. And these are typically, as I'm sure a number of you will know, these are typically called hot events. So we actually identified one recent instance of this where Jerry was sitting down to revise. Okay, and what we are interested in, and which we were going to explore Socratically, is the particular thought that went through his mind, the particular thing that he said to himself as he was sitting down to revise. Now, we are not going to get into the question of how do we know this is the most important thought, where do we go with it, excuse me, etc. Again, you'll have to come along to the 2 days to pick up on that. But what I wanted to just show you really was how we zeroed in on this particular thought: I'll fail all of these papers and my life will be totally fucked up. I'll fail all of these papers and my life will be totally fucked up. So one of the things that we do, and again, this is extremely common within CBT, is that once the client has expressed this, we check it out with the client, and then what we actually do is we write it down. And the reason why we write it down for the client to look at is that in itself helps the client to change their perspective on their own thoughts. So it really takes something which is going around in someone's head, puts it outside of that, and enables them to look at it with a different perspective. And that's really the starting point with this. So what I wanted to do was to just take you through part of this particular thought. And again, there are questions around, because we've actually got, in a way, in that particular thought that Jerry had, we had two almost separate thoughts there. We've got the one about failing all the papers, and we've got the one about messing up his life. So a decision also has to be made about which of the two is worth looking at first. And again, we will look at that on the 2-day course, but I just really wanted to explain why I've not got the whole thought up there for you to look at the moment. So what I wanted to do was to just take you through some of the questions and part of the dialogue that I actually had with Jerry about how or what his thoughts were about this particular thought. So I actually said, so let me get this right. When you sit down to revise, or at least when you did this recently, you said to yourself, if I've got this right, I'll fail all these papers. Is that right? So lots of checking out with the client that we fully understood. And also, I think the idea behind this checking out is to encourage the client to selectively attend to this thought, because so often unhelpful thoughts zip in and out of our heads. We don't have really the chance to look at them carefully, and this is to encourage that to occur. So when I checked that out and he said, yeah. So I started saying to him, so I'm not trying to sound funny here, but I just really want to double check that I'm getting this right. When you say all these papers, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, I obviously mean every single one. So I said, so what you're saying is that you're going to fail every single one of these papers. Is that right? And he said, well, that's probably an exaggeration, to be honest, but I think I'm going to fail most of them. So what we already have is the beginnings of a very, very slight modification here. So yeah, I think I'm going to fail most of them. So if I'm understanding this correctly, what you seem to be saying here in connection with your revision and what you've said about that is that whatever it is that you actually do during the period of time when you are trying to revise, whatever it is that you actually do, what you're saying is that that won't actually matter, because you're actually assuming whatever it is that you do, you're going to fail these. Is that correct? And he said to me, yeah. He said, because I sit down and I look at a book and all, you know, my mind goes blank and I don't really feel that it's of any value at all. So I then again said to him, so if I'm getting this right, what you're saying is that you're going to fail all of these papers because your mind is blank, totally blank in terms of what it is that you're reading. To which he then said, well, mostly blank, at least. So I said, so mostly blank, but not totally blank. And then he said, yeah, but it will be blank enough to make sure I fail. So I said, okay, so you're making the assumption that no matter what you do with sitting down with these, what you're actually saying is that you won't be able to either take in or remember or recall a sufficient amount of information that you're reading, which will enable you to pass. He said, yeah. I said, so when you say I'm going to fail all of these papers, quite clearly, one of the reasons why you say that is because, as you say, when you revise, you feel that you are only taking in a small amount of the information. Can you just take us through what other reasons you actually have for why you believe you're going to fail all of these papers or most of these papers? Because clearly this is something that you spend a lot of time thinking about. So it's probably not just because your mind goes blank. I mean, what other reasons do you have? And he said, well, I just feel it in my gut. I just feel it in my gut that it's all going to fail. So I said, well, that's interesting. So one of the reasons why you feel that you're going to fail here, sorry, one of the reasons that you will fail here is because you feel that you'll fail here. And he said, yeah. So I said, okay, is it always the case that when you feel something, it's true? He said, well, not all the time. He said, and I do take that point, but I feel as if I'm going to fail. So I said, okay, so another reason why you feel this is the case is that you're going to fail is because you feel it in that particular way. Any other reasons why you think you're going to fail? You've mentioned your mind going blank and not taking in some of the information or a lot of the information. You've mentioned the fact that you feel it in your gut you're going to fail. Any other reasons? And he thought about it. He said, well, not really, he said, apart from the fact that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it? And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I tell myself that I'm going to fail, so I will fail, won't I? So I said, oh, right, okay. So you find yourself saying to yourself, I will fail. And because of that, you will actually fail. Is that right? He said, yeah. So I said to him, just so I can double check on this, what you are saying to me, if I've understood this correctly, is that if you think something, you will automatically do it. Is that right? That there's never been any instances where you think something or even tell yourself something, but you don't actually do it. He said, well, that's obviously crazy when you put it like that. And I said, well, what way would you put it? He said, well, I suppose that what I'm saying is if I keep on telling myself I'm going to fail, there's a more likely chance that I'll actually fail. Okay. So there's a more likely chance that you're going to fail. So can I just check? You've given me some reasons here why you say that you're going to fail on all of these papers, although you now actually say most of them. Can I just ask, is it the case that everybody you know has the same take on this as you do? Is it the case that everybody that you know also agrees with you that you're going to fail all these papers? And he said, well, no, he said, a lot do, he said. He said, a lot do though. I said, so a lot of people do, but not everybody. He said, yeah, that's right. So I said, well, who are these lot of people? Can you tell me who these lot of people are? And he said, well, there's a lot that's being written at the moment, he said, on Twitter about how the English exams are going to be really, really difficult this year. So I said, okay, so that's one perspective that agrees with you on one subject, if I've understood that. He said, yeah. I said, and what about people that you know personally? And he said, well, no, I've got a couple of mates who don't think they're going to do well either. So I said, so there's two people. Do they say that you're going to fail as well? No, he said, they're not going to say I'm going to fail, but they wouldn't say that, would they? They just think they're going to fail. Okay, so we've got some folks on Twitter and we've got a couple of friends. But you said that not everybody has that perspective. He said, no. So I said, well, what about you? How many subjects are you taking? And I think he was taking 7 or 8. I said, so the 7 or 8 teachers who have taught this to you, they've gone and told you that you're going to fail. Is that correct? He said, well, no. He said, they haven't. I said, have they told you that unless you do something exceptional, you're going to fail? He said, no, they've not said that. They said they've said I might not get the grade that I want to get, but he said, no. So I said, okay, so how many teachers have you actually been taught by for these subjects? And he said, oh, crikey, I don't know. And he counted them up and he said 14. And I said, so out of these 14 teachers, how many have said to you, you are going to fail all of these papers? He said, well, none of them. So I said, okay. And I said, what about other people that have got a different take on this to you? When you think about all the people you know, who would you say you trusted the most in terms of their opinion? Who do you think actually is probably the most insightful or the most knowledgeable or the person you respect the most? And he said, my dad. And I said, okay. I said, so why do you, just before we asked this, I said, why do you respect his viewpoint on this? And he said, well, he said, he's not, he never gives me an easy time. But on the other hand, he's quite realistic. So I said, oh, right, well, that sounds like a good one to look at. So how many of these does he say you're going to fail? Does he say you're going to fail all the papers? He said, no. He said he actually thinks I'm going to get them all. He said he thinks there's some question marks over the grade, but he thinks I'm going to get them all. So I said, okay, so let me get this right. All of your teachers and your dad that you respect basically think that you're going to pass, but they don't know if you're necessarily going to get the grades you want. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. You know, this belief, I'm going to fail all of these papers. If that happened, what would be the result of this? He said, well, I've already told you my life would be fucked up. So I said, so if I'm understanding this correctly, what you're saying is that something really catastrophic will happen, which will mark you for the rest of your life. Is that right? He said, well, yeah, nobody wants to fail exams, do they? And I said, well, I can understand what you're saying, that nobody wants to fail exams, but I just really wanted to check out with you here whether you go along with the idea that if you were to actually fail all of these, then the rest of your life will be totally messed up. And he said, well, no, I've said that I don't want it to happen. I said, I know you've said you don't want it to happen. Nobody would want that to happen. But I'm interested to know what the effect of that would be, because I get the sense that you're actually saying to me it would be very unpleasant or difficult or undesirable, but it wouldn't necessarily totally mess up your life. And he said, well, no, probably wouldn't. It probably set me back a year or something like that, but I don't want it to happen. Okay. I said to him, this whole idea that I'm going to fail all these papers, I'm just interested in where that idea came from. Where's that idea come from that you're going to fail all these papers, or that somehow or other, somehow or other you're primed for failing? I just wonder what your thoughts were on where that came from, because you haven't, you've said it's not your dad. You've not mentioned your mum. Has it come from your mum? And he said, no, not at all. So I said, well, who is it that you can think of that is saying that all these papers will be failed? And he thought about it and he said, well, to be honest with you, a number of my mates that I'm closest to are the ones that think that. So I said, are these the ones that apply it to themselves, but they haven't applied it to you? He said, yeah. So am I right in thinking that you're getting the idea that I'll fail all these papers? You've got that idea from listening to what your mates are saying about what they believe might happen to them. Is that correct? And he said, well, I never really thought about it that way, but I suppose so. So I said, when you go back and you look at that statement, I'll fail all of these papers, what do you think about it now? And he said, it's a bit catastrophic, isn't it? It's a bit over the top. I can go a bit over the top about things like this. It's actually probably a bit too much. So I said, well, what for you would you say was a much more realistic way of thinking about things for the next time that you sit down and plan to revise? What would be a more accurate, a more realistic thought to be having? He said, well, probably something along the lines of, I might not do as well as I hope, but it's not the end of the world if I do. So I said, if you did have that thought, that I might not do as well as I hope, but it wouldn't be the end of the world, what difference do you think that would make to how you felt while you were revising? And he said, well, I wouldn't be happy. I said, I appreciate you wouldn't be happy, but would you be feeling the same, or would you be feeling different in some way? He said, well, I'll still be feeling anxious, he said, but I don't think I'll get brain freeze the same way. So I said, so it might make a difference to how anxious you feel. He said, yeah. And I said, if you did have that thought that I might not get the grades that I want, but it's not the end of the world, what difference do you think that would make when you sit down and basically try to revise? What difference can you see that making? And he said, well, I suspect, he said, that I probably wouldn't be going up to the fridge so often to see what's in there to eat. He said, I think I'll probably be able to sit for longer periods of time. I said, yeah, and what else? He said, well, I suspect that when I test myself, I'll probably find that I can remember a bit more, although I still think I'm going to get some degree of brain freeze. So I said, okay, that will make a difference as well. So I said, so are these changes good things for you? And he said, well, obviously, yeah. So I said, well, maybe we now need to spend some time looking at how you can maybe remember to have this particular thought the next time you sit down to revise, instead of this other thought that you've been having. And then we can see next week what difference it actually makes to the way in which you've been revising and how you feel. Now, folks, I'll stop sharing my screen here. There we go. I do appreciate that is a sort of monologue that is giving something of the flavor of the conversation that I actually have, but I hope that it will give you, put put some flesh on the bones at least. And to make an obvious point here for any of you that are sitting there thinking this, that conversation in practice does not go as quickly or as smoothly, obviously, as just been indicated. That's been done in order to get this into a 20-minute brief demonstration. So I hope you appreciate that, but I hope you get something of the flavor. I hope you get, incidentally, a flavor of how this is different from telling the person they don't need to worry, how it's totally different from going into a long backstory, how it's totally different from telling the person how to change the way they think, and so on and so forth. And it is, although it's ultimately designed as basically a change strategy within CBT, above anything else, it's a way of having a conversation within CBT. It's a communication style, really. And that's why it runs through whatever it is that you are doing within your therapy sessions. So I will take a breath at that particular point, and hopefully Julia can look for or field any questions that have come up. I'm quite happy to deal with whatever it is that's arisen.
Thank you, Paul. We'll give you a chance to catch your breath. By the way, I've just spotted very nicely Socrates is sitting on the shelf behind Paul.
Yes, sorry.
Well, is he there on purpose, Paul?
Oh no, he's always there. He's always there. He's a reminder to me.
Yes, that's
yeah. And I occasionally talk to him when I feel a bit stuck. So
lovely.
Between sessions with clients, not at the same time.
Yes. There were several questions about slides and
yes.
about recordings for this. While I'm letting Paul to catch his breath, I'll just take you on our website again and give you just a very quick tour. Just 1 second. I've taken myself, not where I needed to be. Just how to find things if you want to find them later on. And I think that's here, share, and now I need to go to, that's not the right screen, isn't it?
Nope, this is the Zoom screen.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, got it?
Yep.
Yeah, so on SDS website, we've got a very useful field called news. And it's right on the front page where you were signing up for these sessions. Just underneath, you can see the field called news. And it gives you all the dates of free Thursdays and free tutorials in CBT for those who do Master Practitioner Diploma in CBT. You find it here. If these dates are not appearing on the front page, you click on all news. You click on all news, and my magic wand doesn't work very well for some reason. Maybe the connection, yeah. And you will see previous news, and there's actually several pages of them. So you can find information which you want to find that way. And if you go slightly back to the previous pages, because I've started it quite a long time ago, and you will see 25th of December last year, free materials videos, and all the videos of our free Thursdays and other free events and videos which Paul records will be listed here. I haven't updated it for a while, but I will do soon. And another way of doing it is to go on YouTube, and on YouTube channel we have our own channel, and that the internet connection is still not brilliant, even though I'm doing it from my hotspot. And you can find all these videos on YouTube as well. You can just sorry. Yeah, you can just put SDS seminars and they will be all shown to you. So either you go through our website or you go directly to YouTube and you can find them. And also, while we're talking about the news items, we also have free materials worksheets and articles. And there's quite a long list as well, which we will continue updating. And you can also go and look at it. It includes our self-care for therapists COVID-19 guide, which we've created in the beginning of the first lockdown, but I guess it will be still useful for you to have it now, and just to remind yourself of the best ways of taking self-care in this current situation. So I'll stop screen share. Everything is slow today for some reason. Yeah, it worked. Paul, unfortunately, I wasn't looking at the chat, but so far I see mainly thank you and the fact that it was all very insightful, which it was. Guys, if there are any questions, do you mind putting your blue hand up so we could pick you up and you could ask a question?
Can I just deal with a simple one while we're waiting, which is that someone had actually asked what SDS stands for, and if you're not familiar, it just simply stands for Skills Development Service. But that's we renamed it SDS a couple of years ago.
Yes, our company is 30 years old. We've celebrated 30th anniversary last year, and we planned to have a lot of events and, you know, everything buzzing and everything. And of course, it all happened online. So hopefully all the celebrations are just slightly postponed, but we'll try to do something as soon as the situation changes. But yes, it was initially called Skills Development Service. Any other questions on Socratic questioning? Yes, I've put the link to the event on Socratic questioning, which is 27th and 28th of January, 2-day event with Paul. We only have 6 places free. So if you want to book on that event, please do. The link was in the chat, but while you are talking, Paul, I can put it in again. Did you spot any other questions?
I haven't yet, but
no, obviously it was...
right, okay, here we go. Yeah. From Amanda, could questions include asking a client for examples? Oh, sorry, it's gone up again now.
Disappearing.
It's moving so quickly now, you see. So
yes.
Yes, asking examples of when they've done something well, as in finding exceptions. Yeah, I mean, you can, yes, you can actually, and indeed, but it's done within a particular context within CBT. So the looking for exceptions is a valuable thing to do within Socratic questioning, but it's primarily designed to find non-confirming evidence. So when it really comes under that perspectives section, really. So although I took it from looking at it from a third-party perspective, in the example I gave, in terms of do you know anybody that would have a different view on this? Another way you could do that would be to say, is it always the case that you tend to fail every single exam that you ever do? To which the answer is obviously no. They may say, well, I fail most of them. And I might say, if that's the case, most but not all, is that correct? And they will say yes. So we might look at exceptions really primarily for eliciting non-confirming evidence for the unhelpful belief. So I know that is used in a slightly different way, for example, than the way it's used within solution-focused therapy, but they are still usable in that particular respect.
Thank you. There is a question from Paulina Fiera. Paulina, if you unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. My question is, I would like to know what concepts of, or what philosophical concepts you draw from Socrates' theory to to work with Socratic questioning, how it's related, basically, Socratic questioning to the philosophical.
Well, my brief answer to that is, to my knowledge, it isn't. Apart from the fact that, you know, that I can't remember the exact quotation from Socrates, which is, "Don't let me convince you, let the truth convince you." But apart from that general guided discovery method of discovering the truth, I'm not aware of it drawing any heavily on Socratic philosophical ideas. But I will be honest here, I don't speak as a philosopher, but I can't say I've ever come across that in any of my reading at all. I think it's literally something where the approach, which is basically the individual discovering what is true by discovering it themselves rather than being told, is the sort of key concept that's drawn from this.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Paulina. And another question from Naomi. Naomi, please also unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hello. Yes, I just want to know, how do you get around the client who says, "I don't know"?
Right. There's a variety of ways in which you can do that. I think the first thing to say is that depending on what that "I don't know" is in response to, I think there are some instances where you just have to have up your sleeve 3 or 4 different ways in which you could ask the same question. I think there are some instances where simply changing the way the question is asked produces a different answer. I think that's one thing. I think that one of the things that I've become much more conscious of over the years is that I am increasingly convinced that I see, and I always have seen, very few clients who are actually non-psychologically minded. I think the whole thing turns on our ability or otherwise to communicate with the individual we've got in front of us, and we have to be more flexible with that. So, and one element of that is the way we phrase the question. So that's one thing. I might get them to give me a third-party perspective. I'd be quite happy to get them to give me a third-party perspective, even regarding the belief that's unhelpful. So, you know, if they do say I'm a failure, and you say, "Well, why do you think you're a failure?" and they say, "I don't know, I just feel it." The first thing I would say is, okay, so one of the reasons why you believe you're a failure is because you feel it. So if you feel something, then you believe it. But then I would say, is there anybody else around who also thinks that? And they're likely to say yes. At which point I would say, so what's their reason for that? Can I just say that one of the reasons for the order of the questions that exist is it enables you to make a judgment from quite an early, in a strange way, less important point in the conversation, that you're more likely to get a no answer. And that can help you to change the way you approach the phrasing of the subsequent questions, when, you know, particularly on perspective questions. I mean, perspective questions are very important. So, you know, there'll be some instances where I know I'm likely to get a no answer. So I might start off with actually some pre-questions like, you know, lots of people. Tell me who you tend to trust the most. Tell you who do you listen to the most? Who do you think is most likely to tell you the truth? So what I might, who do you respect the most? Who do you find that, who is it that says things that you are more likely to think to yourself, it's worth listening to them? So I might ask it as a broad question before I then go on to an authoritative third-party perspective in relation to the actual thought the person has. I think the other thing to say, and maybe I should have said this right at the beginning, particularly the way in which this demonstration has occurred, it's obviously a snapshot of part of what's occurring between me and the client. So you don't go in cold and start asking these questions, because you are much more likely to get, I don't know. And I think, again, I probably didn't give it enough emphasis because of time in this, although I hope I gave something of a flavor of it, the importance of validating what the person currently believes. You know, and I did try and sprinkle that. I check it out a few times, that I've understood it correctly. You know, before we get into the reason questions, I often say to clients, I'm sure you don't just believe this for the sake of believing it. I'm sure there are reasons why you believe it, and so on and so forth. So you may just need, apart from changing the way you frame the questions, you may just need to look at the tone of the relationship and maybe do a little bit of work before that. I don't think, incidentally, this has to be, you know, I'm not talking about sessions upon sessions necessarily. A lot of this could be dealt with in the minutes before you get into this. But I think you've got to keep an eye on that, and it's all about engagement, really. You've got to ensure you've engaged before you can start asking slightly more focused questions, really. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. I think it's 7 minutes to 8. We need to let people go and have their dinner or relax. Thank you very much, and the same for you. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for coming. And I will ask you all to unmute and say goodbye, and I'll see you all in 2 weeks' time when we are welcoming Ray Di Giuseppe to our sessions. Bye-bye now. Bye.
Take care, folks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Good evening.
Bye.
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 Really good to
Thank
see
you.
you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Paul. Bye-bye.